Calvin's triumphant return. 3 years later, however, facing Catholic opposition from within and the threat of armed intervention by Roman Catholics from without, Geneva's city council decided that they needed Calvin's strong measures and invited him back. He re-entered the city on September 13, 1541. This time, he would eventually succeed in imposing his version of the Reformation upon Geneva's citizens with an iron hand. His first act was to hand the city council his ecclesiastical ordinances, which were adopted November 20th, 1541. Stefan Zweig tells us, "One of the most momentous experiments of all time began when this lean and harsh man entered the Cornavian gate of Geneva. A state, the walled city-state of Geneva, was to be converted into a rigid mechanism. Innumerable souls, people with countless feelings and thoughts, were to be compacted into an all-embracing and unique system. This was the first Protestant attempt made in Europe to impose a uniform subordination upon an entire populace." With systematic thoroughness, Calvin set to work for the realization of his plan to convert Geneva into the first kingdom of God on earth. It was to be a community without corruption, disorder, vice, or sin. It was to be the New Jerusalem, a center from which the salvation of the world would radiate. The whole of his life was devoted to the service of this one idea. Calvin's intention to establish ecclesiastical rule would occupy most of the rest of his life. Though recognizing Calvin's influence and power, the small council of 60 and the large council of 200, responsible for civil affairs, resisted being taken over by the religious authority, consistory, over which Calvin held sway. The power struggle continued for years, the councils even seeking to retain control over some church disciplines, such as excommunications, with Calvin defiantly refusing to yield. Finally, in February 1555, Calvin's supporters gained the absolute majority on the council. On May the 16th, there was an attempted uprising against Calvin's exclusion from the Lord's Supper of certain libertarian civic officials. Riot leaders who fled Geneva to Berean were sentenced to death in absentia. 4 who failed to escape were beheaded and quartered, and their body parts were hung in strategic locations as a warning. Evoking the phrase, "henchmen of Satan," that he had years before used against Anabaptists, Calvin justified this barbarity. Those who do not correct evil when they can do so and their office requires it are guilty of it. From early 1554 until his death in 1564, no one any longer dared oppose the reformer openly. Calvin's opponents had either been silenced, expelled, or had fled to save their lives. Calvin's control of the city continued without weakening. He was determined to make Geneva the base for building Augustine's city of God everywhere. Geneva became the symbol and incarnation of that other Reformation, but which Calvinists today claim was the Reformation.